Every leader knows that a thriving organization depends on the energy, productivity, and commitment of its people. But few leaders are able to cultivate the employee engagement and performance needed for this level of success. What's the difference? Positive leadership practices. Welcome to the Positive Leadership Movement Podcast with your host, positive work culture expert, Alex Bratty. Ready to harness the power of positive leadership? Let's dive right in.
Hello and welcome to this week's episode of the Positive Leadership Movement Podcast. I'm your host, Alex Bratty, and I gotta tell you, you're really going to enjoy today's guest and our conversation because she believes that every individual, every team, and every organization has the inner power to succeed. So no matter your current position right now, and no matter your reason for tuning in today, you are going to get golden nuggets of wisdom from this powerhouse of a leader. Her name is Dr. Beth Brown, and she is the founder and CEO of Team Arias, a company she created after 15 years of leading the national program development and adult education at the First Tee. It was there that she established a track record of turning groups into high-performing teams. Overall, she has led more than 60 teams in the creation of programs that have impacted thousands of youth and adults. Her background in business, leadership, and collegiate sports makes her an expert in performance psychology, organizational development, team building, and creating successful programs for youth and adults. Beth is a certified mental performance consultant through the Association for Applied Sports Psychology, an LPGA teaching professional, and a 5 Voices and 100X leader certified coach. She holds a PhD in education and sports psychology from the University of Kansas and a Master of Arts in Sports Sciences from the University of the Pacific. And it is our honor and our privilege to have her here with us today. So welcome, Beth. Welcome to the show.
Thanks, Alex. It's great to be here.
Oh, such a pleasure. I'm so excited to talk to you. I used to be a collegiate athlete as well. And so when I see your background and you have the psychology piece going on, I'm just so excited to hear what you have to share today. So just to get us started, because I do ask all our experts this, what does positive leadership mean to you, Beth?
Thanks, Alex. I have to ask you though, what sport did you play?
Oh, field hockey.
Okay, cool. All right. We'll talk about that offline.
Yeah.
Me, positive leadership, Alex, is really about making others better, not only in your presence, but also when you're gone. And I think it's because of sports. My background for sports, I played basketball and golf in college. Well, I sit on the bench in basketball, but I grew up, my dad was a basketball coach. And I think that idea of making others better, when you're there and when you're gone, a lot of it comes from especially basketball, that idea, the player that you're like, wow, they had a great game. And then you look at the line and they maybe didn't have a lot of points. They didn't have a lot of rebounds, didn't have a lot of assists, just a little bit of everything. But just their presence out there, you could see it and sense it, and everybody knew it, that the team was better because of their presence. And so I think that's why I like that definition, because it really kind of, to me, really relates to sport, but of course to business and other areas of life as well.
Yeah, I love that. Well, and I love the fact that you talk about the presence and the absence, because, when we're present, we're having some kind of an impact because we're physically, energetically there, right? But to be such a good leader that even when you're not there, maybe your words of wisdom or encouragement are just still in someone's head and they just dig deep and follow those. So I think I love that definition, because it really brings out that piece that a leader can have that lasting impact, not just when they're there, not just when they're serving in a particular spot, but that influence can last years, a lifetime, if they're doing it well enough and influentially enough. I love that.
Yeah, absolutely.
Beautiful. So you actually, in terms of leadership, you actually talk about being a 100X leader. So I'm curious, what is that, and why does it matter? Why should we want to be 100X leaders?
Right. Besides that, it sounds cool. It actually comes from, and I have the book right here. I was going to show you and your viewers. So I'm not going to claim that I made this up myself, but this is coming from the 100X Leader book. It's on Amazon and other places by the co-founders Jeremy Kubicek and Steve Cockram.
Awesome.
And part of my leadership certification is through their company called Giant Worldwide. And so they coined that phrase, and I actually was listening to Tony Chapman. He talked about force multiplier, I think, a few podcasts back. So kind of taking that, putting a little spin on it, what the 100X Leader is from Mr. Kubicek and Mr. Cockram is this idea. It's two parts. One, the 100 is about me or about you or about the listener individually becoming 100% healthy, because we can't give away anything we don't possess, right? So we've got to have that health, not just physical health, but mental and emotional. And not that we're all there, but that we're trending, that we're striving and thriving toward that. And so that's the 100. And then the X, I think, is a little bit like the force multiplier, just from a little bit I heard on the podcast. But it's this idea of multiplying your knowledge, your skills, your experiences in others, and doing that intentionally, proactively, and consistently. And so one of the things I was thinking about, just to even more clearly delineate the X, this multiplication, if you think of, there's something called the 100X Leader Indicator. And so we can either just basic math. That was a letters major, but we got some math going on here. So if I mess up, please forgive me. But this idea that as a leader, I can either divide, I can subtract, I can add, or I can multiply, right? And if you think of a scale of 0 to 100, being a divisive leader would be toward the 0 to 10 on the scale of 0 to 100. So obviously, if people are listening to this, they're probably not a divisive leader. And then this idea of subtracting. Sometimes maybe if we're not intentional, proactive, and consistent, we're going to subtract from those around us that we're trying to lead. And then this idea of adding, and I think that's where the definition people tend to think about, oh, well, I'm making others better, you know. And so that would be what we call adding. And that's where, at least my experience, and probably myself, when I'm not intentional, proactive, and consistent, you know, we tend to be in that adding, you know, making things better, you know, just when you're there and most of the time, right? So we're kind of in that 60 to 75% range on the continuum. But if we can strive toward the multiplication, that again, being proactive, consistent, intentional, and I think that's the idea of leaving things better when you're not there. That's that multiplication. Because I think what we've done when we do that is, when we multiply our leadership, is that we're really empowering others, we're liberating others, because they can do it without us. We've created an environment where they're liberated, they can develop skills, and they can do them, and ultimately, hopefully, do them better than us when we're gone. So that's 100X Leader, and I love it, and I love what Jeremy Kubicek and Steve Cockram are teaching, and what they're allowing those of us who are certified as 100X Leader coaches to do with their content and do to help others, teams and individuals.
Yeah, and what a fabulous context. I mean, especially, just breaking the two pieces apart, because I think the 100 piece is just so important. And I love how it's being described, because, you know, very often we hear talk about, you know, we need to self-care, engage in self-care as a leader. We need to fill up our cup first, right? Like, this is sort of the language that gets used around a lot of that. And I feel like sometimes it gets poo-pooed, especially in the corporate world. You know, it feels all too like so soft, touchy, feely, woo-woo kind of stuff. But when you talk about it as 100%, you know, now you've got the ear of the analytical people, right? Those more hardcore, want facts and stats people. And the very concept of it is just so incredibly true. I mean, it resonates so deeply that unless we are completely, you know, as you said, 100% physically, mentally, emotionally together ourselves, what can we actually give to other people, right? Like, we have to take care of ourselves and be, you know, what I call self-leading, right? We have to lead ourselves before we can actually lead others. So I love that they kind of start with self, but then the X is, okay, so you're going to take care of what's at home first. But once you do, then look at the amazing impact that you can have, and have that almost exponential ripple out effect. So I just love the concept. It's very powerful, and it really resonates. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And there's other tools, and I can talk about some things at the end, but things around that again, they're very visual tools, very practical very concrete for those people who like those kind of things, and take some of that kind of, well, in Oklahoma, where I'm from, we call it woo-woo. You said poo-poo, but it's this idea, of we need to start with people, start with communication relationships before we move on to some of the things people like to get into with the execution or alignment execution and capacity. People tend to want to go there, but if we don't take care first ourselves, the X multiplying, not just adding, but multiplying leadership in others, then some of those other things, they might still be good, but they're probably not going to be great or be to what they have the ability to be.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. So, I mean, Beth, you have this extensive sports and performance background. I mean, you were, as you said, a college athlete, but you also went on to study sports science and sports psychology. So you have this whole performance background as well. And so when you've combined that wonderful, background and education with working in organizations, what do you find are some of the keys to a winning team culture?
Right. So, well, there's lots of them out there, and obviously we can look at Google research, psychological safety, all kinds of stuff that's out there.
Mm-hmm.
But what I have done to try to take something that seems to be compelling both in sport and in business, and again, a lot of my work is with sports individuals and teams, but performance runs across the board, is what I call the 3 V's game plan for a winning team culture. And it's value, vision, and voice. Not necessarily in that order, but this idea of, people need to know that they're valued, right? And that's where you get some of that psychological safety coming in there, with accountability, right? We can't have psychological safety without accountability, or we're not going to get to the high performance zone. So this idea of everyone knowing that they're valued. And then if you create an environment where that happens, then people are going to be more compelled to share their voice. And so this idea of appreciating the diversity of voices and skills and expertise and talents that people bring to the table, so that every voice is heard. So with value, then we can have voice. And then, of course, vision, and not just vision like the leader's vision, but a shared vision. So a shared vision along with people's individual visions, that everyone knows their role, everyone knows there's a significance to their role because everyone's different, and they all are going there together. So this idea of value, voice, and vision, I think, are 3 ways that I've lumped things together that seem to resonate with people. And then, of course, there's some practical ways to go about doing that.
Yeah. So tell us about that, because I love the concept, right? And each of those items is just so incredibly important, and really not possible if there's not psychological safety in the workplace, to your point, right? So they sound great, right? Like so many of these ideas do, whether it's related to, leadership or team development or whatever. There's always these great ideas, but then the rubber meets the road in terms of implementing it, right? Like if you're a leader listening to this podcast right now and you like this idea, it's like, okay, but now what? Like, how do I actually translate that from, this sounds like a great idea, how do I get it to work in my actual team, in my organization?
Right. Well, it's definitely not a one and done, right? It's something that's ongoing. And so there's some practical activities, and I'm sure with your background, you've done lots of different things, but I like to think, with value, of really practicing some things around communication, around being present focused. And so some different communication, that kind of comes in from my counseling background. That was not my major, but a lot of practice with counseling and listening and communication skills, some small group facilitation, but this idea of practicing present focused, really other-centered listening. And so, and you can do some things around that where you could put in, like, maybe you pair up people on your team with the person they know the least, and you decide what the question they're going to discuss. And so it's like, 3-minute no fix listening, right? And so you just have people paired up, and it could be something like, what is your strength that you bring to the table? So you share that, what do you think you can contribute to the team? It could be, what is your why? Like, why are you here? Why are you on this college golf team? Or why are you in this career? So something as simple as practicing some, and I call it genuine no fix listening. 3 minutes. If you and I are partners, you're going to share with me, I'm going to listen, right? And I'm going to, we can coach people up to use some body language and different things or belonging cues. So to help the other person feel valued, and then a little feedback to see how the other person felt, if they felt heard. And then you flip those roles. And so that's just an example of an activity to, again, it could be, 30 minutes with your team doing something like that. And there's a multitude of activities along those lines that can be tweaked or customized. And then, with the voice, I mean, there's lots of things there. I think things around team meeting protocols, for example. So we know with, for example, part of the Giant Worldwide, there's a strengths or personality assessment. Like there's a lot of other things out there, but this is my favorite. It's called the 5 Voices. I think it really personalizes it. And so one of the things we know with different voices and different voice orders is that, certain personalities, if you will, or certain voices are going to always speak first. So if we don't have team meeting protocols, then certain people are just never going to talk. Or if they do, when they're pressured to speak, they're sure as heck not going to say what they're really thinking. And so implementing some team meeting protocols, for example, gets at voice. That would be something we'd sit down and we could do some identification of voices on the team, do a little assessment. We can go more in depth, just depends on, but for a shorter activity, we can do some shorter assessment and then put together, say, okay, I mean, just as simple as, all right, we know that Beth, she's going to always say what she's thinking. So Beth, you're not ever going to talk first in a team meeting, but Alex is going, so you get the idea. So just something as simple as team meeting protocols. And then just throwing in there this idea around intentional feedback processes as well. And so often what I find, I mean, it happens all the time in sport and see it happen in business as well. But if you don't have very intentional feedback protocols or processes, just like having intentional team meeting protocols, then what generally happens is the leader gives the feedback first. Or if I'm coaching golf and I'm working with, say, a young person even, or a college student, well, if I'm watching them, and again, this is just a physical skill, but I think it's a very concrete example, then I tell them, I give them feedback, right? And then it's like, well, wait a minute. I never gave them a chance to say, well, I felt this with my swing. And so again, that's not an environment where I'm empowering them to actually learn to be better when I'm not there. That's me as the coach, getting them to rely on me and what I'm seeing and my expertise. Then when they go play in a tournament, they're like, oh my gosh, I don't know what I'm doing. They don't have the awareness. They don't have the feel. And so the same thing I think happens, in business and stuff as well, is if we're not intentional with how we give feedback or that process, and there's different ways to do it, but one of the keys, at least I found, is to make sure that you're getting feedback from that person or others first before you're saying what you think. So those are a couple things, but there's other fun activities in terms of voice. And then vision, one of the most powerful things, and it's super simple, and just did this recently with a college golf team, and it's just unbelievable. Just simply, the whole Simon Sinek, what's your why? And so why are you here? Why are you on this team? Why are you at this university? And it just, people look at you like you're crazy, but it's so powerful. And then it opens doors for lots of other activities and conversations. So those are just a few examples, but I think it's important to have really practical ways. They don't have to be complicated, and they don't have to take 4 hours, right? But I think being consistent, we even talked about with the team, just, checking in, 5-minute culture check once a week, or catching people doing things right. Like we saw so-and-so, if we have certain values or behaviors we're looking for, hey, I noticed so-and-so doing X yesterday. And so taking a few minutes before the start of meetings or the beginning of the week, or with the teams again, if they're out at practice, getting them to check in. So it's that idea of being intentional, being proactive, intentional, and consistent. And of course, more lengthy breakouts and retreats or whatever, Zoom retreats. I mean, all those things are great. But at the end of the day, once those things are done, it's the shorter bursts of reinforcement, being intentional consistently over long term, and making it really doable, where it could be, 10 minutes here, 30 minutes here, 20 minutes there, doing activities. And a lot of it really is around getting people to listen, and where everyone feels valued and heard. It's like, I think that's just so critical.
Yeah. I mean, those are amazing tools and techniques that you just shared. And I'm so glad that you're talking about them being accessible, right? They're short, they're simple, right? I mean, seldom is the solution complicated, right? It's always the simple solution. It's Occam's razor, right? Like when we find that things are getting too complicated, it's usually best to step back and look for something simpler, of course. And I think this is where a lot of the, we go on the retreat or we go on the training, and then we come back and we've got all these great ideas that we want to implement on our team and our organization, but they just kind of get lost because they feel so big. And so what you're describing, I think, helps bridge that kind of transitioning the learning that occurs in something like that, or retreat, into the actual culture so that it actually has an impact ongoing. And as you said, I mean, it's like everything else in life. If we want to be good at it, we have to just be consistent. We got to do a little bit every day of whatever it is. So I love that you're emphasizing that. And boy, I got to tell you, the no fix listening, woo, that's one everybody has got to practice, right? I mean, that's the one where we are so conditioned that when people tell us things, we want to suddenly just try to fix their problem, right? And it comes from a good place. We want to be helpful. We want to be that good person that's supportive. But man, we don't need to fix everything, and people don't want us to, right? So getting in the habit of just, as you said, intentional presence and other listening, like actually just really focusing on what that person is saying, not trying to quickly think like, okay, how am I going to help them fix their problem now? Because that in and of itself can just be annoying and counterproductive for the other person. So I love, love, love the no fix listening. That's fantastic.
Yeah. It's interesting. When I actually myself, I'd never worked with an executive coach. And so about 5 years ago, I mean, growing up, you play sports, you do all these activities, and you always have coaches. In college you have coaches. And so I'd had several colleagues that had worked with this gentleman. And so it was just really interesting to connect with him and to learn from him. And one of the activities I did early on, and I mean, again, simple, but you start to identify people in your life that are leaders, who have been mentors, who have things or traits about them that you admire. Like, why do you look up to them as a leader? And one of the thing across the board was this idea of listening, but really being present focused. And one of the examples that I've given in the past, I don't know if I've ever given them on a podcast, but when I was working on my doctorate at University of Kansas, the men's basketball coach was Roy Williams, who's North Carolina basketball coach. And so, but anyway, he was there a long time. And so our golf office was in the actual Allen Field house, like underneath the bleachers. And so one day we had a big recruit in who we were trying to get. And so, of course, we were trying to impress her and took her down to talk to Coach Williams. He was in the middle of basketball practice. I'm not kidding you. Basketballs flying everywhere. And of course, we'd given him a heads up, right?
Right.
And so I remember walking to underneath the goal. Again, basketballs flying, whistles blowing, everything else just kept going. He walked over to me and the recruit, and in the midst of chaos, and he spent no more than 5 minutes. He looked right at us, right in the eye, talked to her, asked where she's from, what her goals were, etc. And it was just this incredibly clear example that I've never forgotten of great leaders being present, focused. Like, how could he have been like that in the midst of everything that was going on? And so that was across the board the thing that I came to decide that I admired most and saw most consistently in people that had had an impact on me after I'm not around them. It's that idea, again, that positive leadership, that it goes on even when they're not there. And so that's something I'm definitely a work in progress, right? With this idea of being present focused, of really listening. The no fix listening is a great activity. And there's some other tools and things as well. But I think that's why that's become so important to me. Like, it's important. And then the hard thing is I find it harder. We have different circles of influence, right? So one of them, and those, like with your family, I actually find that one the hardest. I'm not very good. I want to fix stuff, or I want to interrupt, and that sort of thing. So I don't know. We all have our areas we need to work on, but definitely if any of my family members are listening right now, they're probably chuckling like, yep, Beth needs to work on that. The she's talking to us is not her strength. So definitely a work in progress.
I think all of these things are sometimes harder with the people that are closest, right? Because we just feel like, I can kind of do whatever I want around them. They're my family, you know. When it's other people, there's sort of that extra little, you know, we correct ourselves. We sort of perk up a little bit, and we're like, oh, okay, I'm outside the family realm right now. I gotta behave slightly differently, you know.
Right.
So I totally hear you, and I mean that's what a wonderful story that you're describing. With the coach. And to your point, when he did that, I bet that you and that recruit felt valued because, like you said, all this is going on around him. He has his job to do, which is all that coaching. And yet he took that time, albeit fairly brief, but he made those 5 minutes really feel important. And he made you both feel valued in that time because he was so present for you and so focused on you and what, you know, the recruit was telling him, what was happening in that interaction in that moment.
Absolutely. Yeah. Absolutely. Sometimes it's not the length of, but it's the quality, that being 100% there. There we go. Back to, that's got to be part of being a 100X leader, right? Because it's 100% focused.
Yeah, I love it. And the 5 voices. So I got to admit, first time I've heard of this, and now I'm intrigued. I want to go find out about it. I mean, the first thing that popped in my head when you said it was, kind of sounds like the 5 love languages, only it's applied to how people express themselves.
Yeah.
Which, you know, if it's the same kind of idea, I love the value in that too. So that's the voices. And we were just talking about the listening, right? And I mean, effectively listening and having a voice, those are the ingredients that go into communication. So tell us a little bit more about this in terms of like, how can teams collaborate and communicate more effectively? Is it with these 5 voices and the listening techniques? Are there other things that you recommend as well?
Yeah, I mean, I definitely have seen the 5 voices be impactful both in sport and other areas of business. So, you know, going through, you know, there's an assessment, of course, just like with other things, but you can do it through a self-assessment. You can do it through an online assessment. And then you can guide through a series of workshops. You'll hear me talk about 5 Voices Boot Camp, you know, which is a shorter condensed version to get a taste of it as part of it, something that we're offering. But yeah, so definitely, I've just recently heard some stories of, you know, 2 team members literally who have sat there, and this was not me, but this is actually a coach that I'm working with and with her team that she has been doing the 5 voices with. And so literally these 2 team leaders that have been kind of not always seen eye to eye were actually talking and like cried it out, you know, and seeing transformational change. Because this idea, you're not just trying to annoy me, right? You're actually bringing something different to the team that's valuable. So when I think we're done and you're like, wait a minute, I've got another idea. Or when it's like, oh my gosh, you've already asked 3 questions. You mean you have 10 more? Well, again, you're bringing something. It doesn't mean the more we understand all these things, then we can set some boundaries and some guidelines for how to interact. So, you know, if you're the person with 99 questions, then maybe you have to come up with your top 3, right? Because that's important, but you got to think through that. Or if you have 10 ideas, maybe bring your top 2, you know, et cetera, et cetera. If you're the loud voice, you know, what we call the pioneer, who's win, and who's driving for that goal out there, then maybe you speak last, you know. So there's these rules of engagement, if you will, that go along with all of it. And so I just love it because it's super practical. Yeah. One specific tool that can be used with the 5 voices, but definitely as a standalone leadership tool, is what we call the communication code. And it kind of goes back to that conversation we were having about, it's so natural for many of us to critique, right? And so there's different ways to be. And so almost like if you could break that code. So maybe up front, let's say if, you know, you're my new best friend, Alex, you know, that's, you know, so, and we're talking and whatnot, and you sit down with me and you're like, gosh, Beth, you know, I just need you to listen. I just need you to care. So that's part of the code. You know, I don't need you to fix it. So I know you're good at fixing things. And so I don't need you to bring that critique, but today I need 15 minutes. Just listen. I just need you to care. or, hey, you know what? I just had this amazing thing happen. I don't need you to ask me what's next. I just want to celebrate, just give me a chance to share and celebrate. So there's these different things that are part of the communication code, but obviously critique, celebrating, and caring are part of it. But each segment of the communication code, it's at its simplest, you have a common language you share with your team. And so you start to use these words and know what they mean. And then you set the stage, you give the code away. So if this is with your partner or significant other or spouse, or with your children or whoever, your best friend, it's like you let them know, hey, this is what I need.
Yeah.
And so there's no ambiguity. And so then if somebody if they're like, start to critique, oh, wait, if you were my best friend, I'd be like, are you critiquing me? I just need you to care for a minute. Just give me 5 more minutes, And so you start to use this common language, which becomes objective. And that kind of going back to the bigger picture, the 5 voices, that's also similar. It starts to give a common language that teams can share that takes the subjectivity out of it. It takes the personalization out of it, that I don't like how you are. And so you start to use this common objective language, whether it's big picture, 5 voices, one specific tool, communication code. Again, all these things start to add up where our communication becomes very objective. We use terms, we know each other's means, and we take the personalization, we kind of depersonalize it, which, still can sometimes set us back, but it's like, oh yeah, they're not against me, that we really are here. Right. We're all fighting for each other's highest possible.
Yeah. And it's at its core, it's, especially with the 5 voices, it's like deepening our awareness of who the person is and the way they approach things. I mean, I do a lot of work around strengths in organizations and in teams. And it's a very similar pattern that, once people understand their top strengths and we share them in teams, it almost increases communication, improves it almost instantly, because now we know where the other person's coming from. So sort of to your point, like instead of John being the really annoying guy in the meeting who, when we think everything is buttoned down and everybody's got their next steps, he wants to start asking questions or throw out new ideas, and everybody's like, oh, come on. But now we know why he does it, because curiosity is his top strength. So, hey, here's an idea. Why don't we give John some, tasks and roles that play to that strength, right? And same idea with your 5 voices is like, let's leverage that. Let's use the way that person communicates in a way that is more effective. And as you said, it takes the air out of the balloon, right? It depersonalizes that whole subjectivity of like, oh, here he comes again with that thing. It's like, oh, you can almost even have a joke about it now, right? It's like, oh, yes, God, we know you're going to have the questions, so come on,
Yeah. I was talking to one of my good friends, actually, and a business colleague the other day, and her, like, the voices are, and we're all of them, but it's pioneer, connector, nurture, guardian, and creative. And so we have like a voice order. So for example, I'm a connector, creative. Well, she's a very strong guardian. And so she was talking about something, like you can actually joke about yourself. Oh yeah, I'm asking a lot of questions right now. My guardian voice is coming out,
right.
or whatever. And so it's not just with each other, but it kind of lightens, again, it deflates the balloon or lightens the atmosphere where you can actually be productive and get things done. And not just power forward, but get things done in a way that really maximize all the talents, all the voices that your team members bring to the table.
Yeah, because now we're just more aware of the dynamics that are happening, right? Instead of trying to just, as you said, push through it, it's like, oh no, we see them now. We can see the dynamics that are happening. And so we can roll with them. We can have fun with them. And it's, to your point, it's a common language, that it's a framework that gives everybody that sort of permission and that ability to call things out for what they are. And everybody's comfortable with that. And we can then communicate better, collaborate better, be more efficient, be more productive, be, better performers overall.
Yeah,
so
absolutely. Yeah. It's like this idea that we're not spending all of our energy inward with our team trying, with a lot of drama or miscommunication, et cetera. We can actually focus our energy to move forward, focus it outward. If in sports, we'd say we'd be able to focus on, if we're playing another team, right, getting ready for that team versus having to deal with all of our own drama or what's going on, with teammates, et cetera.
Yeah, exactly. Oh, such wonderful, wonderful. I mean, you've given us both today. You've given us sort of the great concept, sort of the vision level, if you like, but you've also given us such practical tools and ways to think about how we can implement these things in very, as you said, simple and easy to do and fast, right? They can happen quickly during a day. So, and I know we've barely scratched the surface of your expertise and all the work that you do. So I know that our listeners are going to want more from you, Beth. How can they get in touch with you? How can they connect with you further? And I think you also have a very generous offer to share as well, right?
Yes. Thanks, Alex. Well, people can reach me. Their email, it's beth@teamarius.com. And I think you'll have the spelling for that, right? I don't need to spell it out loud right now. Okay, so beth@teamarius.com, or they can go to the website teamarius.com and click on contact me. So either of those ways are great. And there's a couple of things. One, if there's an individual out there, whatever field you're in, sport, performer, young, experienced, whoever you are, and I am offering a 30-minute free consultation just for us to get a chance to know each other, right? And see if there's any possibilities that I might serve you in your performance. And then the other thing that's really cool, this is more team oriented, and it is through my certification as a 100X leader coach with Giant Worldwide. And so we're offering some programs around what we're calling invincible teams. And so as part of that, the initial step is you actually get a free 5 Voices boot camp, which is, a 60 to 90 minute, right now would be probably a virtual session, depending on where you are and depending on the state of the world. But a free 5 Voices boot camp for you and your team. And if you want to learn more about that, then you can also reach out to me the same ways, Beth@teamarius or teamarius.com, and I can share that information about the Invincible Team offer with you.
Oh, I love it. And actually just spell Arius just in case, someone's listening and they're not able to see online or whatever.
Okay, yes.
Spell it out for us.
It's a team, and then Arius is AUREUS. AUREUS.com. So
wonderful. Oh, generous offers. And hey, I don't know about you people listening, but I am curious about the 5 Voices for sure. So that sounds like a really neat offer. And you've seen how much expertise that Beth has and how many tools she has in her toolbox. So if you feel, that could help you, take her up on her very generous offer for that 30-minute complimentary session. Indeed. It's been such a pleasure having you on the show, Beth. Thank you again for coming and for sharing, so many golden nuggets, like I said at the beginning. I knew we were going to have such a great conversation. So thank you for sharing your expertise with us today.
Well, thanks, Alex. I really appreciate it. Thanks for having me.
Thank you. And to you, our listeners, thank you so much for joining for another episode. If you have positive leadership stories to share, or you have questions on this week's topic, or you weren't able to, grab a hold of how to get hold of Dr. Beth or take her up on her offer, you can always connect through me. And so any of those questions, stories, want to connect with Dr. Beth, just send me a note at questions@positiveleadershipmovement.com. I always love to hear from you, and I always love to have those connections. All right, that is a wrap for this week's episode. This is Alex Bratty signing out and thanking you for being part of the Positive Leadership Movement and inspiring me to do what I do every single day.
Make sure you subscribe to the show. If you like this episode, please rate and review. If you want to get more from Alex, check out Happiness at Work, where she provides leaders with a proven path to cultivate a positive work culture that increases performance, productivity, and profitability. Go to happinessatworknow.com. Join us next week and harness the power of positive leadership for your organization.